Hi, everybody. This is Eric from Valve, and I'm joined here by my colleague Alden, who works as a designer here on Steam. And today, Alden is going to walk us through the sale page editor. All right, Alden, let's start with the absolute basics. What does the sale page editor allow you to do?
Yeah, at a basic level, the sale page editor allows you to bring in any number of games, packages, bundles, video, text, banner images, and organize them in a really flexible, powerful way to communicate whatever it is that you're trying to communicate about this set of content.
Can you give us some examples on when you would want to use this sale page editor?
Yeah, you might want to use this if you're organizing, say, a developer sale where all of your games that you make are on sale together and you want to have a landing page to point players towards. You could imagine doing that during a summer sale where you want to be able to show people all of your set of games. You can also potentially organize a regional sale where all of the games made from a certain country and you're helping organize and put that together. Or a themed sale where games that share some certain attribute like tag or genre or theme and organizing those together into some kind of promotion. There's also other events. You've probably seen sale pages for things like PAX or Gamescom or E3, so kind of physical events that might have a digital counterpart as well. All right, so this is the overall page structure. And as you can see, below your branding and background art, it's made up of a series of modular components. And so any different kind of content can go into these modular components, and you can rearrange them and you can organize them in whatever order makes sense for you. So for example, you could have one module that is just made up of games, and you can determine, should it be one big image of that game, or should it be 4 smaller images of 4 different games? And you can make that choice and you can kind of control it as you're building your store page. You can also have another section that is made up of special news posts if you want to be able to pull in news posts from your individual games and highlight those. And you can set them to display as a carousel that people can scroll through. Or you can set it as a live stream player and you can show your live broadcast that you have going on during this sale. Or you can have another module that is made up of just text where you describe what your event is or who you are as an event organizer. You can also have a section that is specified as tabs, and that will help modify and filter the content below it. So if you have hundreds of games that you're trying to organize, you can use tabs to break up your sale page in that way. You can see here as an example, let's say I load a series of games into one of these sections. Then I can determine, do I want it to be one big section that shows off a single game? Or do I want to have 2 smaller items in that row that show 2 different games? Or do I want them to be much smaller and show 4 games? Maybe we're getting down to the point where we're showing a bunch of DLC for a game, and it doesn't need to be quite as big, but you want to be able to list out more on the page. So it has various kinds of display options like this for each of the sections that you can control. And then for any given section, you can control how we're going to organize and feed in that list of games or text or events that it's going to be displaying. So as an example for a list of games, you can feed it a static ordered list of games, and then you can drag and drop to control the order that you want to display those games in. Or you can define a set of games and have it randomly shuffle those games every time a different user comes to the page. Or you can have it automatically populated based on the wish lists or recommendations that we have for that user that's viewing the page. Or we can define a big list of games at the top of the page and then have different sections with different filters that will show different sets of games. So you can imagine defining a big list of 100 games, and then you could have a section that says, these are action games, and we can set filters to only show action games from that big list at the top.
All right, so that's some really helpful theory about how this sale page editor works, but let's dive into the tools now so we can actually show you how this happens.
All right, so here we are in the events and announcements backend. You probably recognize this if you're posting announcements and news to your... What I'm looking at here is I have a particular announcement that's been set up and sale page has been enabled by Valve. So now when I go in and edit this event, I will have a new tab that shows up here that says sale. So the rest of the components of your event and announcement are here, things that you would normally put in, such as event title, an event description. These things will show up on your store page or in the places where your events normally show up as you post them. So let's flip over to the Sale tab and look at the hands-on the controls here. So this gives us complete control over the modules that are on our page. And there's a few kind of settings up near the top of the page that are just settings for the whole page. So for example, we have a vanity page URL here, a special URL, and you can see whatever you change that to will change on the URL that you're able to point to for your sale here.
And that URL is helpful as a partner because you can point your users to that URL when the event is live.
That's right. Yep. So now we'll scroll down. We'll get back to this linked app list in a minute. This is a really powerful feature, especially if you have more than a handful of games that you're trying to organize. Next down, you'll have sale page, background, and artwork. So there's some information here and some Photoshop templates that you can download that will specify how this background art shows up and how you want to think about where your critical parts of your logo and branding are. For the purposes of this sale page, I have put together a background piece already. Let's pretend that we're making the Steam Next Fest again, and I'll just go ahead and upload that background image here. So it is successfully uploaded, and you can see a preview appear here. And at any time, there's a preview sale button over here, and as soon as you hit that, you pop over to a preview page. Now everything looks kind of broken because there's no content here yet, except I uploaded a background image. So as we continue to edit our event, you'll see bits of this fill in with new content. Alongside the background image, there's a setting here for how much space you need to allow for your image before the content starts. So I'll set this to a higher number just to make sure that our content is not overriding. And you can save as you go along, but anytime you can preview and you'll be able to see your changes whether you've saved or not. So let's scroll down and look at some of the modules as we add and manage the content of our actual sale. You'll start down here under sale page contents, and you can see that already there's no sale page sections defined yet. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this blue button to add a new section. As soon as I do that, this new section is going to ask me to select what type of content we're going to be showing in this section. So you can see from this dropdown, there's a lot of different types of content that it can support. Is it a set of apps and bundles? Is it just a big blob of text? Are we going to be displaying news and events? Do we want to have a little widget that shows the follow button for your developer or community group? Broadcast player. If you're doing a live stream on your page, then this will be what surfaces that. Event schedule. This is pretty infrequent that you'll need to use this. This is something that we use on much bigger events like the Steam Next Fest, where there's hundreds and hundreds of different games, and we're trying to display a schedule of upcoming events to the players that are watching. Tabs is a way that you can organize, again, a really big set of content, or if you want to have different kind of sub-pages within your sale page. Tab buttons, that just puts a section that will display the same set of things that you defined within tabs. So we'll often put that at the bottom of a page just to give players another way to jump between tabs. And then links between other store pages, that can give you a set of banners that you can put on your store page or on your sale page to link to other places within Steam. So let's dig in and look at some examples. Your most common section that you're going to be using will be apps and bundles. All right, so once I've selected that, then for each section, you have the ability to set a title, set some background settings, and then this is about how to manage the games that are going to be displaying in that section, and then the display options for that section. So let's kind of go through this bit by bit. For the title, we have a bunch of titles that we've already translated if you want to pick from those, or you can select custom title and enter your own custom title. So we'll just set this as the custom title. Background settings, you can expand that, and then you'll see I can specify gradient color for the background, the label color. I can even upload an image to display in the background of this section. For now, I'll leave these blank. We'll come back to this.
And none of that is required. It's just an ability for you to make it more customized.
That's right. There's a lot of kind of power tools here that you don't necessarily need, but they offer a lot of flexibility so that you can maybe have different colored sections so that you can make different sections stand out differently, or maybe you have them color coded for particular reasons.
Now, Alden, before we move on, if you enter a custom title for your section and it isn't one of the predetermined, pre-translated sections, that means it won't be localized for other languages.
That's right.
Is that right?
You can manage localization yourself. So once you've put in this language, this title, you can see there's a language drop down here, and there's always one in the preview bar up here at the top as well. And selecting either of these to change to a different language will let you then see what is in the text fields for that language. So you can see there's no German text entered for this custom title, so it's just blank. So you can switch to a different language and fill that in. There's also a way to manage the localization for the whole page. And if we scroll back up here, there's a managed localization section over here. And with these tools, you can export and import a CSV file of all the different unique strings and tokens that make up this sale page so that you can coordinate with whatever process you currently use for localization, export them, translate things, and then import it back into the system.
So that's one of the inherent advantages of using one of the pre-localized sections is that you're able, it's already done, all that work is done for you, but you're able to do it yourself if you want to.
Yeah, that's right. So for my example here, I put featured, but really if I remove that custom title and I switch back here, well, we already have a translated title called featured. And so if I select that, now I know whatever language customers come to this page in, they will see the correct translation of featured.
Now, Alden, should you also think about localization when it comes to the background images of the sale page?
Absolutely. Yeah. So especially your logo and any text that is included in your branding. So you can see this background image has a whole bunch of text in it. And so you would have a set of different background images and just upload them through the same way. And you can specify which language they are, or like your store capsules, if you name your files with the language at the end of your file name, it'll automatically detect that and apply them to the right language.
So, Alden, why is it important to have localized content for a sale page?
Well, on Steam, customers speak many different languages, and Steam supports at least a couple of dozen different languages at this point. And so it's really important to make sure that you're thinking about and considering customers wherever they live and whatever languages they speak so that they can understand what your promotion is, who you are, and what the contents of this page are. All right, so let's dig into the contents of this section. We've already defined this apps and bundles section, and we've given it a title, featured. So now, how do we add games to show up into this section? Well, there's a few different ways that we can manage these games. And the first I'm going to walk through is just adding individual games one by one. So the way that you do that is in this field here, you would just start typing in the name of a game. So in this case, I'm just going to put in Portal. We'll select Portal. We'll put in Portal 2 as well. So now we've got two different games in there. We can talk about display settings, but really quick, let's go over and preview our page and see what it looks like now that we've added those two games. So you can see I've got those two games. They show up next to each other. And you can already see a couple of problems going on here with the page. And the first being that you can see this section overlaps our branding image. So we didn't leave enough space for this branding image to be completely readable. So the way we would fix that is is we'd go back to the sale background image, and we would give a little bit more space for this offset here. And you can see as soon as I jump over to the preview now, there's a lot more space there, and we can see our games below the branding.
Now, there's one other problem that I'm noticing right away is that it's really hard to see the section header there, featured, against that yellow background. That white on yellow is hard to see. Can we fix that?
That's right. Yeah. So let's let's go back and we'll manage that within the section that we created. So here's our apps and bundles section called featured. And let's go take a look at the background settings. And this is where either we would add a background behind our section so that there's maybe a darker color back there, or we can change what that label color is. So right now that label color is white, and I can select that and get a little color picker and, well, let's make it black instead. So now that I've made it black, we can preview our sale and we can see that the featured title up here is much more readable now that it's black.
Could you also have an image there if you wanted to have an image as the header?
That's right. So there's also, you'll notice in the space here for customizing the background, you can also upload an image to appear behind that sale section as well. So it will wrap kind of around and behind those games that are listed there. As an example for color management too, we can just pick a couple of things here. I'm going to change the label back to white so that's readable over the new dark background that I've given it. And now when I jump over there, you can see that there's now a dark gradient behind this section of games. Maybe makes them stand out a little bit more on my page.
And the gradient is from black to gray.
That's right, because I just specified those two different colors back in the editor here. You'll notice I have to keep scrolling down when I switch back to edit the sale page, just so that you know where we are on the page here. So you can see a little preview of that gradient. I've selected black at the top, and then I've selected gray. We could try a different color to make that even stand out more. And now you can see it pick up that updated gradient. Okay, so we have a section with 2 games. Well, what happens if you have more games in that section? So another way that you can manage this, I'm going to remove these 2. And let's say that I have a couple dozen games that I want to put in there. If you have the list of their app IDs, then we can click this Edit Raw box, and we can just paste those set of app IDs in here. And when I do that, you can see that it drops all of these games now into this section. And if I go back into Edit Raw, you'll see it's pulled in a little bit of metadata too into that section. So now I have these special games, all these games in here, and I just grabbed this list of app IDs from the latest Steam Next Fest. But I've got these in place now, and I can change the order, and I can say, which ones do I want to surface first? So if you want to organize your games that way, you can do so. Now let's go over to Preview Sale. And there's my section with the gradient background. And you can see it's by default displaying 2 large capsules and then 3 smaller capsules. And it's all displayed in a carousel that I can scroll through.
Now, Alden, why does that section appear where it says 9 hidden?
Yeah, so this is looking at my preferences as a user, and it's telling me that some items are hidden out of here because I've set some preferences as a customer using Steam. So each user that is visiting your store page might have a slightly different experience if they have set preferences like hiding mature games or hiding games that are tagged in a certain way. There's any number of different kinds of preferences that users can set that might affect how many things are displayed in this section.
Now, earlier, Alden, you mentioned that you can display games in a section as a list, an ordered list, or you can display them randomly and shuffle every time a user comes to the page. How would you set that up on this particular section?
That's right. So let's scroll down below this list, and there's a few different options that I can employ here. So I can tick this box to say randomize order of top items. And what this will do is it will randomize within the set of games that it is able to show for the user. And what that does, the randomization is actually, it will pick an order when a user signs in and looks, or when a user loads the page, and it will always show that same order for that user. But then when a different user loads that same page, they'll get a different randomized order. So that makes it easier for somebody to explore, click into a game, come back to this page, and not have everything totally change.
There were a few other options at the bottom of this page on how the games in this section will be displayed. Can you walk us through each one of those?
Yeah, so there's a lot of powerful options here. By default, carousel rows. So you recall in the preview, it's showing 2 rows of games. We can have it show 3, or we could just have it show 1 single carousel row. So one row is literally just a single row of games, and you can scroll through that. Let's go back to the editor. Scroll down. Let's change that back to 2. By default, we have this presentation where it will show vary per row. So it'll show 2 capsules, then 3 capsules, then 4, then 3. So if I crank this all the way up to 3 carousel rows, then you can see it's doing 2 in a row, 3 in a row, and then 4 in a row.
Now, what if you don't want to display it as a carousel? Are you able to just uncheck that option and have all of the games be displayed?
Yeah, so if you uncheck display as carousel, then it will try to show all of the games that are in that list, and it will do it items per row, either the default here, or you can manually say, okay, for every single row, I want it to always be 3 items per row. And so since I've unticked carousel, now when I preview, I just get a single big grid of all my games. You'll notice here in the background, my background image ended, and now it's just a dark gray color. You also have the ability to set your background color that it will fall back to when your image ends. So if you were doing this scientifically, you would have already known the color value that you want to pick. But generally, you'll have your background image, as you see I did here, it fades to the edges to a solid color, and then you'll pick your background color to match that. And now if I go preview my sale, you'll see I didn't quite pick the right shade of yellow, but it's pretty close. So you would just set the background color to match that color that you've faded to on the edges. All right, so we've looked at manually managing a list of games here, and there's a few other display options here. You can also, I have 36 items in this list, but let's say I don't want a huge grid of all 36. Instead, I can turn on a show more button, and I could have it say only show 4 rows of capsules, and then it'll show this show more button. So now when I preview, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, and then there's a show more. And when I click that, it'll just load another 4. And I'll click it, and it'll load another 4 until it's loaded all the games in that section.
Now, Alden, if you were designing a sale, and I know you've designed more than your fair share, do you have any best practices or good tips for folks who are designing a sale page that have a lot of different games to show? Because naturally, you may want to think you want to show all of your games all of the time, but that might be a little bit overwhelming for a user navigating their page.
Yeah, I think you're going to want to think about how you want to slice up your set of games and what's going to make sense to the customers that are visiting. So a lot of times the special case might be that you have a new release that you really want to highlight, and so you might make that bigger and more prominent than everything else. So I could add a new section. Let's select apps and bundles, and then let's say I just want one game and I want it to be really big at the top. So I'm going to just go back to Portal 2 as my example here. And I'm going to change my settings so that there's only one carousel row, and the items per row is just one item. And when I do that, I get a couple of different display options that become available here that are only available for single item sections. There's a couple of really cool ones here. There's a library art display, and there's an animated library art display. So let's take a look at those really quick. So I've selected that one. This is my biggest single game, so I probably am going to want to move this up to the top of my page. So I can either do that by this section has a little arrow, and that'll bump it up above whatever sections I have above. Once you get a sale page that has multiple sections on it, it can be hard to kind of visualize where you are in that. So we have a button down here in the footer called Reorder Sections. And if you click that, you'll see, oh, there's my 2 sections. And you could imagine if you have 10 sections that this is a much easier way to visualize what are those sections and how are they organized. And I can just do this to move my new section above the older section. So now if I hit preview, here's my sale page, and you can see I've got a really big presentation of Portal 2 at the top of my page. So maybe this is my newest release and I want to make sure that everybody sees the newest release and knows that it's important and exciting. And then maybe my other titles are down here. So you can imagine adding a number of different sections to organize your games in different ways. As you add more sections, you'll find that having all of this information displayed all the time gets a little bit tedious. There's a button in the corner here called Minimize All, and it will just collapse everything in your editor tool, which makes it a lot easier to kind of scroll and see where it is that you're working. So we just walked through and explored how to manually control the set of games that are in each section. But there's another way that you can manage if you have a really big set of games. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these two sections, kind of start over. And we're going to get back to this section near the top called Linked App List. And this lets you define a really big set, or, well, any number of games that you want, and make them accessible to your whole sale page. So we'll go to Edit Raw, we'll paste in this list of apps, and hit Confirm.
Now, Alden, what is the difference between using the linked app list and pasting a number of games into an individual section?
Yeah, so if you have a lot of games, and this is probably most useful if you have maybe over 50 games and you want to be able to organize them in different ways that players might expect to find the games. So let's say that you make, let's say you make a bunch of different games, or maybe you're organizing a regional sale and you have a bunch of different games. Some are action games, some are simulation games, and you want to be able to organize them that way. This will be a lot easier way to manage a big list of games. And then the individual sections that you create on the sale page can just be set up as filters and show whichever games meet that criteria. So when I pasted in this big list of games, you'll see for each of these games here, it shows labels and a number. And so in this case, labels 13, if I click on that, I can inspect, look, it's pulled in the store tags from that game. It's also pulled in a few feature tags for that game. So this game has a demo available right now. It also has full controller support, and it is coming soon. So these are things that I can set as filters to hide or show different sets of games. So I'm going to collapse my list here because 176 games is a lot to scroll past. And now I'm going to go back down to my Add Contents section. And we'll select Apps and Bundles. And now we can go down to Populate Items by Filter. And so if I turn this on, then you'll see a button appear for editing filters. And this gives me a bunch of controls for how to filter that set of 176 games that I added at the top of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set some tags that it has to have. So I'm going to add a section of action games. And so maybe they need to be the set of games that are tagged with action and action RPG or action RTS. And you'll see here that based on the filters that I've set, there's 61 games that match that criteria. So now when I save and close this, I want to go preview sale. I will have a section, and it will just be that set of action RPG, and action RTS games loaded in there.
And the reason why you don't see a section header is you didn't define one.
That's right. So this is an unlabeled section. Might be hard for customers to understand what's going on there. So it is important that when you add a new section that you give it some kind of title. And I'll use one of our pre-translated titles for action. And now when I preview my sale, you'll see this is the action section. So let's try that process again really quick with another example. So I'll add a new section below my existing section. I'll select Apps and Bundles. All right, let's give it a title. This one, let's call this one Strategy. And let's turn on the filters. And then I select Edit Filter. And then here, again, I can select some filters. And there's a few different kinds of strategy. So let's see, there's 42 of those. And how about some grand strategy games? Looks like they're all kind of the same set. So you can see the set of matching items here change as I add different requirements or options. Say maybe strategy RPG. So that number went up to 44. So there were 2 games that were tagged as strategy RPG that were not tagged with grand strategy or strategy. And if you want to narrow it, you can add another set of filters. And you can add as many of these as you want. And you can say, well, these must not have, let's say that they're not coming soon. So these are the games that are released that have those set of tags. So this gets us down to just 3 games left. And again, at this level, you can see the filters that you have set, which things it must have, which things it must not have. And then if I go over and preview my sale, you can see there's my new section of strategy games, and there's the 3 games that are left after I applied all those filters. The other thing that you can do when you're adding a new section and populating apps and bundles is you can use this smart section. And this gives you a couple of different preset ways of pulling in a set of games and displaying them. Probably the most common one of these options that you'll want to use is showing featured items from the user's wish list. And so if I set this, what this will do is on the sale page, it will show a section with any of the games that I have wish listed. And then if Eric shows up to the sale page, it'll see the set of games that he's wish listed from the set of games that have either been linked at the top or added manually to any sections of the sale page.
And what happens if a user hasn't wishlisted any of the games on the page? What will they see?
Yeah, so in that case, I think we can preview it here. You'll see on your wish list, when you're previewing it, it'll show you that that section is here, but in the actual live sale page, it will just collapse and hide that section because the user doesn't have any games on their wish list.
So that's a really good opportunity to feature games to users who are already thinking about purchasing a game, and you can show it to them front and center.
That's right. This game that you've already told us that you're excited about, here it is. So often that wish list section, we often see that put first on the page because it's really, we already know that there's some games that the user is interested in. So let's make sure that they see those first.
So what other kinds of content can you place in individual sections?
Yeah, so we went over that set earlier, and let's take a look. I'll add a new section. There's a number of different options here. Really, the most common that you're likely to encounter would be maybe a text section, your developer homepage follow button. Let's take a quick look at text section and what you can do there. So if I add a section as text section, then I get this familiar BB code editor that lets me do some text formatting, including things like inserting a YouTube video. So if I have a URL for a YouTube video and I go ahead and insert that, there's some different presentation options. Let's say let's pretend I have a brand new trailer for my game and I want to highlight that at the top of my sale page. I can insert that within this text section. Then I'm going to move this new text section up to the top. And now when I preview my sale, there's my fancy video large at the top of my sale page. And then, of course, it's a text section, so you can also fill in all sorts of things like your description, your title, who you are as a sale organizer or as a developer, different kinds of formatting options.
Just remember that you need to localize that as well if you're going to add any text there.
That's right. And as you can see, some of our text options are white by default, so you may want to play around with background color to make sure that what you're putting this text on top of is dark enough to be readable.
And What other content would you possibly want to add to your sale page?
Other content, once you select any one of these options, will explain a little bit about how you enter it and what format it's looking for. So let's say you have some news announcements and you want a carousel of recent announcements from your various games. You can just add that in, and then here it tells you enter the event URL to put in. So you would just grab the URL from the event that you've posted and insert that as well. Or you could select your developer page, and this has you put in the URL to your developer homepage or another community group page, and that will add the follow button to your store page. Broadcast player comes with all the broadcast settings. It's actually reminding you that broadcasting is not enabled for this sale event. So what you would do in that case is you would scroll back up to the top, and there's a broadcasting tab. And this is where you need to enable broadcasting and set all your configuration to allow broadcasting to appear on your sale page.
All right, Alden. So we have successfully set up our page exactly how we want it to look. What's next? How do we set this sale live?
Yeah, so like any other event or announcement or news that you're going to post, there is a Publish tab. Before you do that, you'll want to go over to the options and make sure that the date and time for your sale is set to what you would like for your start date and your end date. And these should be set to the start and end of your actual sale, like when you're going to be running your promotion, when this page is going to be live and you're going to be sending customers to it, or when it's going to be surfaced in Steam through some other featuring. So like most other events that you can schedule in Steam, you can set a start date in the future, and then you can set an end date some amount of time after that as well. So once you've made sure that you've had those dates all properly configured, then you just slide on over to Publish and hit the Publish button, and your sale page will then be published, and it will be accessible and live based on the start date that you've set.
And if you don't set a start date, it will just make it immediately visible. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So on the date options, if you just have now selected, then when you go to Publish, it will immediately be a URL that players can hit to find your landing page, and you can immediately start sharing that and promoting it in whatever agreed upon locations.
Now, one thing to keep in mind is that after you hit Publish, it can take a few minutes for that sale page to become publicly accessible, right?
That's right. Yes. And then the other thing to keep in mind is once you've published it, any changes that you make to your sale page will go live as soon as you hit the Save button. So if you've published and you've made it live, then if you go in here and you start adding more sections or changing the text on here, as soon as you hit Save, those changes will go live. Thing to keep in mind before you publish your sale and your event is to make sure that you have a cover image defined. This image is the image that will be utilized when you or players share your sale on social media, or also in various places where your sale might be listed within Steam. So remember, you can just drag that in, make sure it's the right dimensions. This is also a thing that is important to localize as well. You can always see the preview there. And once you have that, then you're clear to publish your sale.
That should get you started on the sale page editor tool. And of course, here is a link to the documentation. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to the biz and tech teams directly using the link below. Thanks so much for watching.